Hi, good morning from Dubai. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our first webinar for the year. It is also our first webinar on the data center space, and which will likely be the first of many given the intense interest that you've shown in terms of this topic. My name is Jennifer Aguinaldo. I am MEED's Energy and Technology Editor. For those of you who have attended previous power, water, hydrogen webinars in the past, it's good that you joined us today. And for those of you who have joined us for the first time, MEED is part of the Global Business Intelligence Services called Global Data, with presence all over the globe. MEED has been around for over 60 years, and we've been providing intelligence, analysis, news of the most important events, economic developments across the Middle East and North Africa region during the past 60 years. So before I get into the main presentation today, I want to mention that the analysis and facts and data that I'm presenting today is a small set of data derived from a premium intelligence report called GCC Data Center Projects Market. So we come up with these periodic reports that provide comprehensive, unrivaled insights and intelligence in terms of the data sectors of the sectors that we cover. So this is the first one for me that covers data center projects. So it fuses data and intelligence from global data and MEED in order to provide you with a great picture, a complete picture at the time of its writing in terms of the profile of projects, who are the top clients, what are the project opportunities, tangible project opportunities that you can pursue. Definitely a research material that can help you in your developing your strategy as well as your business development. I would also want to talk a little bit about the Saudi Giga projects that MEED organizes annually in Riyadh. So if there was going to be one event that you will attend in Riyadh this year, maybe it's not an exaggeration to say make it this event, because it basically brings together the top giga projects, decision makers, and procurement leaders in Saudi Arabia who would take that platform to talk about the status of their projects, what are their future development plans, and what tenders are upcoming. So if you're into business development, trying to sell your products or services to these giga projects, as well as those other projects in Saudi Arabia that may not be officially labeled as giga projects, then this would be an excellent opportunity, a 3-day event where you can network with those very important executives and individuals. Right. Yeah, so the past few weeks have seen major developments globally that would help set the stage in terms of today's presentation or discourse, if you will. So first off, yesterday, you might have seen the news about MGX, the Abu Dhabi Mubadala-backed technology AI fund that's part of the 500 billion Stargate project in the US. So it was announced. So MGX, along with OpenAI, a creator of ChatGPT, Oracle, another major US technology company, and Japan's SoftBank have formed a joint venture to invest $500 billion on AI infrastructure in the US over the next 4 years. It's significant on so many fronts, but especially for those of us here in the region, it basically affirms the ambition of Abu Dhabi, of the UAE, to be a global player in terms of AI. It also part of this sustained shift towards more riskier assets, because sovereign wealth funds, as you know, usually invest in assets that provide stable returns to cushion their economy from the volatility of oil and gas prices. But we're seeing a major shift in terms of the assets that they're looking at. But that's mainly because they want to be a part of this global developments in AI. The second, so this $500 billion, as you know, is almost equivalent to the nominal GDP of UAE. This dwarfs the 20 billion pledge made by Hussein Sajwani, the Emirati billionaire who's the founder of Damak Properties, who before the inauguration pledged along with Trump to invest $20 billion in the US to build data centers across several states there. And of course, on 13 January, this is very significant. The fact that the White House published a brief of a regulation that limits that sets limits in terms of the export of advanced integrated circuits or graphics processing units that cater to AI. And that regulation basically splits the countries in the world into three. The first tier being its closest allies, where the export of these chips will be without limits. And then at the bottom rung, you'll have the third tier, which is the countries of concern, which includes Russia and Macau/China. And of course, the GCC states presumably would be in, of course, it's in that mid-tier, where a cap of 50,000 GPUs will apply over 2025 to 2027. And any export beyond that will have to go through further approvals. So that would have a very significant implication in terms of the projects we will be talking about today. And before we go to this first slide, I also want to emphasize to share that last week at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week and WEFES, is an annual event that gathers energy stakeholders globally. So there was a unanimous agreement among politicians, energy leaders, state enterprise leaders, that AI/data centers is indispensable towards achieving security of supply, affordability, and sustainability of energy. And while at the same time, it is an area of concern, if you will, in terms of the energy density that it requires. Okay, so first, I would also like to say that a copy of this presentation has been sent to you or is on its way if you haven't received it. And we would also want to invite questions if you have. Feel free to send in your questions, and then I can address that in the last 10-15 minutes of this presentation. Right. So increased digital adoption and the rise of AI have drawn the spotlight to data center projects globally and across the GCC states. So it's a crossover between infrastructure and real estate. Infrastructure, because it provides essential services. So we now call it a fifth utility, in addition to gas, electricity, water, and telecoms. It's also real estate because it yields rents. Although it can also be seen as an asset class that carries different risks for those of you who are looking at investing in it. So it started the good old data center at the corner of your office, and then certainly over the past 25 years, I've seen major developments from when data center is the mainframe, and then we went to client server, and that moved to distributed computing with the application service providers, with the model shifting from capital expense, where you buy licenses of software and pay maintenance services over the life of that license, to renting it as a service. So that was a major shift in the 2010s. And now, of course, we're meeting through Zoom, which is, of course, hosted presumably in a hyperscale data center that might be within the jurisdiction of a country you are at or elsewhere. So we've seen the evolution of data center facilities over the past 50, 70 years. And of course, the main opportunity now that I'm hearing from my contacts would be for data center providers. So there's these substantial plans to build facilities that will cater to the hyperscalers, the likes of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, who need the scalability and efficiency to deliver their platforms so that companies, individuals can use their AI models. Right, so I suppose everyone would know this by now, who are the top hyperscalers driving the investment for data centers in mature markets like the US or Europe, as well as in emerging markets like Asia or even the GCC. Certainly, we've seen the top hyperscalers pledging multi-billion dollars of investment over multi-years, particularly in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So these are the top hyperscalers, data center providers, AI platforms, if you will. And the most important thing to remember is that they are now being ranked according to their power usage efficiency or effectiveness, given that these are energy intensive, energy dense facilities, and therefore how they consume energy and how they offset their carbon is being highly scrutinized today. And it's something that developers here in the region will also have to consider in terms of the ESG standards and regulations that are being implemented globally and in some jurisdictions here in the region. Right, so why now? So as I said, there's a big focus, there's a big interest. There's 2,000 people of you who registered for this webinar, for instance, which shows the huge interest that the data center market is generating over the past few years. So the rising demand for data storage, cloud computing services, and digital transformation efforts throughout the region is driving this interest. So according to IEA, the Arab nations have an internet traffic compounded annual growth rate of 34% between 2019 and 2022, probably higher since then, versus 22% globally. So it is clearly an underserved market in terms of data center and transmission infrastructure investments. Every country has nearly digital and AI strategies, and this is in line with creating jobs. So of course we know that AI offers this threat, has this threat of displacing jobs, but some of the governments see it as an opportunity for their locals, especially AI related jobs. I was in a panel last week where Emirates Global Aluminium was talking about, they started their AI division in 2021 with 6 people, and last year they have 160 people in that division. So it shows that potentially AI creates more jobs than it displaces, and that's definitely an interest for the GCC government. So there is a ambitious net zero targets, and there is plans to become AI hub in the region. So if you followed COP28 in 2023 in December, they basically pledged tripling renewable energy, tripling nuclear capacity, and doubling efficiency. And there's unanimous opinion that you can't do that without AI. And so that there's this push for AI. There's economic expansion and diversification plans, and the Dubai 33 strategy. Over the next 10 years, Dubai wants to have 30 unicorns over the next 10 years. So that's 3 unicorns a year, or having startups reach a 1 billion valuation every year. So obviously those are in preparation for the post oil era, if you will. And then on the one hand, in terms of the main features, the key advantages of setting up a global data center here in the region, you've got abundant and cheap clean energy. So on average, the tariffs for solar independent power projects here in the region would be about around 1.35 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's around a third of what you might see as a global average. It reached about 1 cent a kilowatt hour sometime in 2021 in Saudi Arabia. And then of course the geographical location. This picture basically shows you the landing, the subsea communications cables, and there's increasing number of landing stations across the region, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the UAE, basically bridging the internet traffic between continents, Asia and Europe. And there's abundant capital. Of course, we know that Saudi Arabia has created a technology fund, which would eventually have 100 billion backing, and it's called Project Transcendence. There's another project, potentially 100 billion investments for advanced electronics manufacturing in Saudi Arabia as part of their economic diversification and industrialization program. And then of course Saudi Arabia, the Abu Dhabi's MGX as well. Labor, there are constraints, there are challenges, like the labor market and supply chain constraints, which I will talk a little bit later on. And this is a challenge in the region as well as globally. And then there are land acquisition and regulatory challenges as well. I would now like to ask you there's a poll question here. If you can just participate, we'd like to know which segment of the data center market you or your company operate in, just to have a view of who are these guys interested in this topic. So we'll give you a minute to respond to this poll question. Sorry, you will have to vote. Nabil, is there a button that they can press? Right. Okay, you see on your screen as well. Right, so very interesting. So we've got 30% are EPC and MEP contractors, about 6% about data center operator, 6% hardware active component suppliers, 2% hyperscaler user, 3%, and consultancy about a quarter, 24%, and the rest account for it. So okay, so welcome to all of you, and hopefully you will find useful, insightful information and analysis over the next few slides. Thank you. Right, so I'll spend a few minutes talking about the regulatory framework across the UAE. So the GCC states are at various stages of implementing their AI strategies. So the most advanced, you can argue, would be the UAE, which formed its Ministry of AI in 2017. It came up with this personal data protection law in 2022. It set out a digital economy strategy in 2031, and ancillary strategies that look at fourth industrial revolution strategy and a national defense strategy as well. As I mentioned in Abu Dhabi, it's very important to note that G42 was formed in 2018 with the backing of Mubadala, Silver Lake, and Microsoft. In 2022, they came up with Noor, which is an Arabic NLP model, and in 2023 they they released Falcon, which is a large language model using 70 billion parameters, I believe. And last year, of course, the MGX fund was launched. And only this year, last week, Abu Dhabi basically launched its strategy and a plan to invest $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion for that strategy. And at WEFES, the state utility, EWEC, and Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Future Company, basically signed an agreement to build this mega project, which is comprising of a 5 gigawatt solar PV and 19 gigawatt hours of battery energy storage system that presumably will be allocated. This will provide 1 gigawatt round the clock power of clean energy that will presumably support the AI projects in the region. The next slide will look at the rest of the GCC. Saudi Arabia is catching up. It has a personal data protection law enacted in 2021. It has a data and AI authority, which to touch agencies. One of these, the National Center for AI, developed the Llama Arabic LLM. And there's a plan for SDA to expand one of its data centers to up to 5,000 GPUs along with NVIDIA. So the other countries also have similar AI strategies, hoping to build data center capacity, attract investments, and play a role in terms of this booming industry. There are about of course there are thousands of data centers across the world. In terms of the number of data centers, various sources would point around between 80 to 100 data centers across the GCC. It's small compared globally, but if you consider that these countries' ambitions, that there's potential for this to grow and to play a strategic role in terms of how the development of large-scale data centers will be taking place. Right, so this is from data might be quite important for many of you, especially the EPC contractors and consultants as well. So our data, MEED data, basically indicates that there's this pipeline, there's this projects market for data centers. About $10.6 billion are under study, 750 million under design, 3.1 billion under execution, and over 2 billion under bidding. And there's a caveat, of course. This covers projects that are known, whether they are planned, completed, or under execution, and it may exclude high security or confidential projects by the government or state enterprises. But it is indicative in terms of the opportunities that are out there. And I'd also like to add that these would, especially for projects under execution and bidding, this would cover the EPC and MEP cost mainly, and does not include generally the cost of active components, which would be your servers, GPUs, and cables, among others. No, this figure does not include, this is, as you can see in the title, this is the GCC data center projects market. This figure that is on your screen is only for the GCC. It doesn't include the pledged investments by the MAC in the US. In terms of the historical contract awards of data projects by year, you'll see this trend in terms, as I mentioned. Please bear in mind that this would be MEP, EPC contracts and exclude the active components, which usually cost, which depending on the type of data center may cost more than this EPC project cost itself. So interesting to note that it peaked in 2022, mainly because this data included the crypto mining farm in Al Reem Island in Abu Dhabi. If you want to be strict about data centers and you don't want to consider that as part of the market, then this 2022 figure should be about 1.2 billion, making 2024 your flagship year, if you will, with 1.5 billion projects awarded. Yeah, so in terms of country, the UAE is by far the top ranked country in terms of the awarded contracts. I see a few interesting questions. I will try to answer those. And again, the intelligence report that we are offering, which is where you are eligible for a $600 discount, will provide the context and the bigger picture. And I'm only presenting snippets of data and analysis contained in that report. Okay. So in the questions box, someone just asked this question, and I'm glad to take this question on later on. But if you can have a say, if you were, let's turn the table and ask you this question. Okay, we've got the, you can see that. So it will significantly slow down projects, about 13%. It will somewhat slow down projects. You've got 23% of you agreeing with that statement. 14% saying, hoping it will not have an impact. Well, it's also true that there's nearly always been an export control mechanism in place anyway to keep these countries seen as hostile to the US from being able to get their hand on these chips, on these processors. DCOs and EPCs turn to Chinese suppliers, 18%. I don't know is the has the most responses of 31%. Right. That's interesting. So based on people that I've been speaking to, it is, well, there are two ways to look at this. Just this morning when I went to visit the link at the White House announcement that sort of refers to the final draft of this regulation on 13 January, that link is deactivated. Maybe it's part of the transition to the new administration, but maybe they're also looking at, there's always a possibility for President Trump to reverse or to amend this, whether it goes which way, we don't know. So there's that, potential scenario. And the other, but if it holds true, then it will most certainly slow down some of the projects. But remember that there's this clause where beyond 50,000 GPUs, entities can still apply and get approvals for their chips. And again, it's unofficial, but MGX's presence in Stargate project, these are rumors and not confirmed in any way, that and the 1.5 billion investment by Microsoft in MGX appears to have been I mean, it's an inevitable conclusion that they have made a choice on who they will source advanced microprocessors from for their future data centers. And also in December, it was there was talk that the exports for the chips required by Abu Dhabi by G42 has been approved by the US. So it remains to be seen. But I think all options are on the table. But mainly if Trump doesn't overturn this regulation, then there will be an impact, and it could be significant for the planned project. I mean, it depends on the data center that's being planned. If you are a data center operator looking at renting out space to hyperscalers, then you definitely need those the NVIDIAs. So that will be an issue. So for the top clients of those projects that are under execution, according to the data that we have, you have Kazna as the largest client in terms of data centers under execution. Their shares bump up when, if you know, they've basically launched started construction on a 100 megawatt AI optimized data center project in Ajman. So this is a major project for Kazna, which, as you know, it is a merger between Injazat and the Talik and Etisalat's data centers. So they've got, I think, over 24 active data centers today, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've got other clients, data center operators. Sometimes you see the Ministry of Interior in Saudi Arabia and banks, among other companies, as having the most number of projects under execution. The top contractors in the GCC region, again, this is data for this GCC region. You've got Laying O'Rourke, mainly because they are the main contractor for the 100 megawatt for the 100 megawatt AI optimized data center in Ajman. And next off, we have BK Gulf. And then by virtue of these crypto mining farm being built in Al Reem in Abu Dhabi, you have Al Amri as the third largest contractor. Again, a lot more. This is put into a proper context in the PIR report that where we derive this data. So make sure to check that report, because it provides context. It also provides a profile of the clients and their spending, planned spending over the next couple of years. Certainly, as I mentioned in one of my first few slides, data center assets, facilities are energy intensive, and the region has some of the most affordable cost of energy. And there's this commonly accepted conclusion where data centers will go where, number one, the regulations are friendly and where you can get the cheapest energy. So this is from Turner and Townsend. I'm sure those of you who are operating strictly in the data center space would have seen this chart or seen this report, where they basically benchmark different regions, 50 data center locations globally, and that would include Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and compared the cost of building data centers in those areas. And so the conclusion is, while the data center construction costs in Saudi and the UAE have obviously increased last year, it's still low compared to the top, the most expensive locations, which is Tokyo in Japan, Singapore, Zurich, Silicon Valley, and New Jersey in the US. So this is very significant in terms of those of you who are looking at investing in data center facilities here in the GCC. We have the top selected projects under execution. Definitely, these are the projects that we know today. There might be projects that where let's say it's still contentious whether it's 100 megawatts, whether it's 30 megawatts, whether it's 5 megawatts, because you see every day all these announcements that we'll be investing 1 billion EdgeNext of the max that we will invest 1 billion over the X number of years to build data centers. And then you have let's say, so these are the projects under execution that we know of today. The Kaznas data center in Ajman, of course, is the largest that is under execution. And there are several others, mainly in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia as well, with being built by clients such as the Ministry of Interior in Saudi Arabia and Etisalat, among others. Again, a complete picture, complete list is in the report that I have been referring to throughout this presentation. So for data center projects market, so for those of you looking at future opportunities, this is what we know today. There are, as I mentioned, about nearly 11 billion worth of data center projects that are being planned, under study, being explored, and these about 1.8 billion under bid evaluation today. It's a significant market, though I must say, however, that if you go back to that slide where we have the annual contract awards, those of you who know MEED, those of you who follow the construction market know that this is a very small, a very tiny, if you will, part of the multi-billion. Like last year, I think the total value of contracts, capital projects awarded between the main sectors, oil and gas, power, water, energy, construction, exceeded over $270 billion across the GCC states. So the data centers, at least those that we know, only account for 0.002% of that total contract awards. However, this is an area of great importance because of what we call the multiplier effect. How can we meet our ESG targets? How can we meet net zero commitments? How do we decrease carbon emissions over the next 10 years? How can we meet our voluntary contributions in terms of lowering greenhouse gas emissions? And the answer lies in being able to have AI, whether these are large language models, whether these are small language models that help in improving efficiencies in our companies, or if you have the war chest of ADNOC or Aramco coming up with something like an agentic AI, which combines traditional machine learning and advanced AI, as well as your operational technologies that are autonomous, creating agents that can set goals and make decisions with limited or no human intervention. So that's the scale of ambition that we have, and so that's why there's a major interest, there's a major focus on data centers today and over the next couple of years. So for the top future projects, I can't say enough that the full context of these projects, profile of those who will be procuring these projects are included in the PIR report. So you've got Datavault. If you've heard of Datavault, this is a subsidiary that's backed by Abu Nayan in Saudi Arabia. The business model is to become a data center operator. They plan to build 300 megawatts of data centers, but that's not just in Saudi Arabia. I think they're looking at us at the central, at the CIS, Central Asian countries as well. So this, I think they should be talking about their first or launching their first data center this year. There's of course Amazon having announced what $5 or $7 billion over multiple years for an AWS data center zone in Saudi Arabia. That would be a major source of opportunity for contractors. And then, of course, I mean, you can see the scale of difference. There are projects with edge data centers, which is quite important, especially for sectors that use operational technology industries, for instance, where you have a lot of you have a lot of automated processes where machines have to be controlled semi-autonomously or autonomously, where there's visions, whether it's aluminum, whether it's steel, whether it's petrochem, where you want to limit the number of humans, people on the plant, in the plant. So these are opportunities for some of you, whereas co-location remains a key business model, and there will be major opportunities to rent out space, cracks to hyperscalers who are intent on building their own, as well as due to the demand, or as demand increases, to rent spaces from data center operators. Okay, we have another poll. If you can have another minute to respond to this question, which is quite important for us to know if we can cater to your needs and business. I work for MEED, which is we provide news analysis intelligence. There's MEED projects that provide business intelligence, a very strategic tool for those of you, especially for business development people. We have our premium intelligence reports that if you don't subscribe to MEED projects, or if you are already a subscriber, then you might need to have context, including the regulations, including the trends, the hot trends in a particular sector that might not be captured by that. Then you can, there's intelligence reports that can help out, that provide comprehensive information, analysis in terms of where these markets are going. And then we have events, top-notch events, just like the Giga projects that I've mentioned earlier. It's a 3-day event bringing together. It's become like a platform for the Giga projects in Saudi Arabia to announce their future projects. They would bring their procurement leaders in that conference, and you can network with, so that's very valuable. And then, of course, we have marketing solutions. Right, so thank you. Definitely the different divisions in the company will be looking at responding to this, actioning these responses. Right. Now this is probably one for the consultants, for those ESG conscious, those of you whose mandate has to do with ESG. So is it data centers, are they a friend or an enemy? As I mentioned earlier, I went away from the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week last week, feeling that it's an energy summit, gathering politicians, business leaders. Bernard Looney, who was a former BP CEO, was there. He's now chairing the Prometheus hyperscaler in the US, which is aiming to have a zero carbon footprint data center. So there's this feeling that AI will be embedded in everything that it do. But the main reason is can it save as much emissions as they create? So if you take together all the data centers in the world, they account for about 1.5 of electricity used globally, 1% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and 2% of carbon emissions, so just below the airline industry. And therefore, care must be taken that they do not exacerbate the carbon emissions projects. So why do they need this much? Mainly because of the cooling systems. And of course, the argument, one of the reasons it can be contentious building this much data center in the GCC is the ambient temperature, the fact that, you reach up to 40, 50 degrees Celsius in the summer, then you will need a lot more cooling. But well, according to people we speak to, there are solutions. There's renewable energy powered data centers. So AWS, all the hyperscalers are looking at procuring, getting off-taking renewable energy for your data centers in the region. You have the Diwa Moro hub in Dubai, which is powered by renewable energy. You have, as I mentioned, the mega project by EWEC and Masdar that will provide 1 gigawatt of round-the-clock solar power, will support their AI projects. And then there's SMR, small modular reactors, this 300 megawatt nuclear fission technologies that can be built next to a data center, or build a data center next to a small nuclear power plant. So again, the Prometheus hyperscale, you can look it up. They're looking at, they signed 100 megawatt offtake with Oklo, which is a nuclear technology startup for clean energy. And then you can look at geothermal power, waste to energy, among others. And of course, liquid-based cooling. The previous generation of data centers used air cooling systems. So liquid-based cooling would be an opportunity to further bring down the carbon footprint of the data centers. With this, you can waste heat. So the process of, you need so much cooling because the GPUs create a lot of heat, and you have to take that heat out. And when you do that, you create waste heat, which could be wasted, or it could be in the form of hot water, which in cooler countries, like in the Scandinavian countries, the hot water could be used for district heating. Of course, it doesn't apply here, or to heat. So it's the reuse of this waste heat that is crucial also in lowering the emissions of these data center projects. This is a quick summary. We've got a few minutes left for questions and answers. But yeah, so this, we've talked about this, economic diversification in full swing. There's net zero targets. The GCC states offer some of the world's cheapest clean energy. And there's the increased digitalization across enterprises and governments. And then, of course, that it's worth mentioning that the governments and the state enterprises enjoy high credit rating, which makes the cost of capital low. And in between the positive and negative, we have the uncertainty over data sovereignty. So number one, it could drive the construction of data center facilities here, because you'd never know how the data, how compliance with the data regulations will evolve over the next few years. But it can be it can be a negative, because your hyperscalers might have to look into it again. And there's, of course, geopolitics in terms of the security in this region. And then, of course, supply chain challenges. There's no homegrown chip manufacturing industry. The threat of these export controls is real, and that has to be addressed. There's relative inexperience in hyperscale and data centers. And there's, of course, there's the EISG concerns and access to electricity. Basically, they are trying to expand everything. Industries, they want to do green hydrogen, which is energy dense. So data center will have to be competing for that electricity available. They have the capacity to expand, but it all depends on how much expansion is being planned. Okay. Right. So I can, again, this you are entitled to a discount to this PIR report on data center projects. You're invited, if you can, to attend these events in Saudi Arabia. I'll have a few minutes for some questions. is this annual spend or total project spend? So that so if you go back a few slides earlier, I emphasize that that's EPC, that's the EPC and construction cost. It would include the building, the facility, cooling, fit out, and it excludes the so-called active components, which would be your servers, chips, cables, and your operational costs. So there would be so we're not presenting these as the data center market that includes all those stuff. This is basically targeting you, mostly EPC contractors, and those of you are supplying that equipment to those markets. These are the opportunities. This is the size of that data center construction market, if you will. Right. Okay, so this is a question I've been asked often. How much power do planned data centers require? I don't have that answer, but the fact that they are trying to build hyperscalers, hyperscale data centers. So one prompt, one chat GPT or a large language prompt. When you use that, it consumes 10 times more computing power and effectively 10 times more power than if you use your old Google search. So whatever that baseline is, and there's a potential that it could go up to 10 times. And the fact that Abu Dhabi, IWEC, and Masdar are building this 1 gigawatt solar powered with battery energy storage plant of 1 gigawatts. I mean, they have enough capacity. They have enough capacity, and they have an annual plan to build 1.5 gigawatts of renewable energy, and there's nuclear, among others. But why do they need this? It's because it gives us a glimpse in terms of the extent of their plan, in terms of their AI project. So it's humongous. I don't have I don't have a concrete megawatt in terms of how much power these data centers will need, but it certainly is an area that we can look into, especially because of the vast interest that this webinar and this report has generated. So that's certainly an area that we can look into more closely, and it's likely that global data which we are a part of would be able to provide that information as well. Why are we not covering major markets in data centers like US, Russia to compare with the GCC? I think I've mentioned it in passing that still in terms of raw compute capacity or the number of data centers, then it's still small, the GCC, but it could, but it has big ambitions, and definitely you've seen this pipeline of projects that are being planned. So it could increase, but I think, and maybe again, because those markets are maturing, they're near capacity in terms of data centers. So there's clearly an opportunity to get a piece of that pie and have more data centers built here in the region. Okay, yeah. so definitely water is an issue. So data centers require water, water for cooling. It depends on what technology of cooling. Air cooling would require a lot of water. This liquid cooling, despite it being needing water, will require less water for the cooling. But some, there's this cooling technology that's immersed in water as well, so they do need water. And of course, no, on the one hand, you have high ambient temperatures here in the GCC. On the one hand, you have scarce water resources. And of course, the answer would be we can desalinate, which is also a source of emissions, right? So the key being you can have renewable energy powered desalination plants. And of course, the greater work that is required if you have to be fully ESG compliant is what do you do with brine, which is the byproduct of desalination. So the easy answer for the people I talk to, their technologies that they're hyperscalers, it is not an issue. Water is not an issue. They can desalinate. But of course, there's another layer where, of course, you can desalinate, but what are you doing with the brine? So that's another area of research and innovation, I guess, in the future. Can you give a breakdown of 14%? Again, the report, the PIR report that we have will be able to provide more context and more details in terms of those projects. Are most DC projects in Saudi Arabia DBO, EPC, or BOT, BOO? I think most of them at the moment are being built as an EPC, especially if it's directly from the client, whether it's Aramco, East Center 3, which is the Saudi telecom company. I think most of those are EPC, but the trend is to move towards BOT and BOO. I think if I'm not wrong, that might be the model being pursued by Datavolt in Saudi Arabia. Could we have some color to average equity IRR for shareholders? I don't have that data today. So there's this conversations about data centers being a crossover between infrastructure and real estate. And infrastructure being, there's usually it relies on offtake between the data center operator and the hyperscalers. So it could be 8 years, 2 years, could be short term, could be long term. So it does have that sort of model that is quite similar to what you have in the power or water in the utility industry. So IRRs, I think is something being evaluated by many investors because, as you know, the high technology obsolescence puts in. Some say they age faster because compared to your real estate, because you have to keep expanding your capacity, replace your processors to respond to demand. So they could age faster, but again, this is something that we can look into, but it's an area of interesting conversation or debate, I'm supposing. Are there public tender process in Saudi Arabia for DC projects? Or the client send request for EOI to a limited number of potential contractors? So what we're seeing is some projects are directly negotiated. So you'd have, for instance, these dragon data centers between Lumautin and China Mobile. They from the get-go, they are with ICS Arabia, which is the one building the data center. So that's directly negotiated. They go through public tender. Are there projects, as I mentioned, if they go into this BOO model, then there will be a public tendering process definitely in the future. But right now, it's a mix between directly negotiated contracts, EPC contracts, and a hybrid perhaps. And that eventually it will lead to BOOs if that is proven to be a business model that makes sense for these markets. Okay, so in Qatar, yes, indeed, there's a project between Ooredoo. So Ooredoo just obtained in September, announced updating financing of $500 million, if I'm not wrong, to expand its data center facilities, not just in Qatar, but in other markets where it plays. So definitely that's worth looking at over the next couple of years. We will be looking at what that entails over the next 12, 18 months. There seems to be strong interest for data centers in Qatar. So you have Ooredoo, you've got Misa in Qatar providing data center services, and there's obviously a plan to expand those. And again, they have resources. They have enough power, and they can expand their capacity to accommodate this. So definitely it's an area that you want to keep looking at. What is the main reason for low project costs? So number one, you've got again low cost of energy, and number two, access to affordable labor market. I think that's another key reason for the lower cost of construction in the region compared to those countries, those locations that was in the slide. Right. There are more questions, but I think we've overshot the time. Let me just see if I could accommodate one more question. Bear with me. What is the major source of energy for data centers? Again, it's still conventional. Well, it depends on what they get from the grid, right? So there's a shift for clean energy. There are certificates where that would say, yeah, we're purchasing this renewable energy, but mainly it would be conventional energy. What role do you envision for circular economy models in the future for data center energy usage and waste management? I think I managed to provide some answers in terms of the reuse of water and the use of renewable energy and other small modular reactors, among others. Right. And then of course there are other measures like this so when you're doing artificial intelligence, you need capacity, compute capacity for training them, which is 20%. And the large part would be for inference. This is when they go to work. That's when you start interacting, they start providing you with answers. That's when they consume 80% of the compute power they need. So and to be able to deliver that with low latency, there's this move to build data centers close to the users. So on the one hand, you can build data centers remotely for security reasons. That has always been the case, but you're also seeing it with travel around Riyadh, for instance, and even in Dubai, you'd see that the construction of data centers close to the load centers to deliver low latency and the speed that the AI requires. Right. So I think that's all we have time for. Again, we have MEED offers these services, these reports, and we do have, if there's any way we can cater to your business, or if there's any new project you know of that you might want to talk about, or you can reach me. I've got my my details on this presentation that is being sent to you. We are so open to having conversations, and I hope to see you in the next webinar where it's about power, hydrogen, water, or data centers. It's been a pleasure presenting this. I'm sorry I don't have enough time for all the questions, but I hope I managed to provide a flavor of what this report offers and what MEED data is doing, MEED and global data is doing in this space. Until the next webinar, thank you all so much. See you again.